I thought I knew my father. I thought I knew everything about his life, his work, his values. But as I stood in that lawyer's office listening to a stranger claim half of my inheritance, I realized my entire childhood had been built on a lie. My father had a second family, and they were about to take everything. My name is Jordan, and this is the story of how I discovered my father's secret life, how his betrayal nearly destroyed me financially and emotionally, and how I fought to reclaim what was rightfully mine while uncovering the truth about the man I thought I knew. My father, Michael Harrison, was a commercial airline pilot. He flew international routes for one of the major carriers, spending weeks at a time overseas, then coming home for a week or two before his next assignment. Growing up, I was used to his absences. My mother explained that his job required him to be away, that he was working hard to provide for us, and that we should be proud of his dedication. And my father was my hero. When he was home, he was present, attentive, and loving. He coached my Little League team, helped me with homework, and taught me how to fix cars in our garage. He seemed like the perfect dad. We lived comfortably in a nice suburban neighborhood. My mother was a school teacher, and together, they'd built a good life for our family. I never questioned any of it. When I was 27, my father suffered a massive heart attack during a layover in Singapore. He was rushed to a hospital, but he didn't make it. He was 61 years old. My mother and I were devastated. The airline flew us to Singapore to bring his body home. The funeral was held a week later. Hundreds of people attended: colleagues, friends, neighbors, and family members. Everyone talked about what a great man he was, how dedicated, how hardworking, how much he loved his family. I held on to those words like a lifeline. But everything changed 3 weeks after the funeral. My mother and I met with my father's estate attorney, a man named Harold Chun who'd handled my parents' legal affairs for years. Harold's office was in downtown Seattle, a modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. We sat in his conference room, expecting a straightforward meeting about my father's will and life insurance policies. Harold looked uncomfortable from the moment we walked in. He kept adjusting his tie, clearing his throat, and avoiding eye contact. Finally, he spoke. "Mrs. Harrison, Jordan, I need to inform you of a complication regarding Michael's estate." My mother frowned. "What kind of complication?" Harold took a deep breath. "Michael's will includes provisions for another beneficiary. A woman named Elena Martinez and her 2 children, Sofia and Carlos Martinez." The room went silent. I didn't understand what he was saying. My mother's face went pale. "Who is Elena Martinez?" Harold's voice was gentle but firm. According to the documentation Michael provided me, Elena was his domestic partner. They live together in Miami. Sofia and Carlos are his biological children. Sofia is 19 and Carlos is 16. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "That's impossible. My dad lived with us. He was home every few weeks. He couldn't have had another family." Harold slid documents across the table. Birth certificates, school records, photographs. Sofia and Carlos Martinez, both listing Michael Harrison as their father. There were pictures of my dad with them. At birthday parties, graduations, holidays, pictures I'd never seen. A whole life I'd never known existed. My mother stood up, her voice shaking. "This is a mistake. Michael would never do this. We've been married for 32 years. Harold's expression was sympathetic. "Mrs. Harrison, I understand this is shocking, but the documentation is legitimate. Michael updated his will 5 years ago to include Elena and the children. According to the terms, his estate is to be divided equally. Half to you and Jordan, half to Elena, Sofia, and Carlos." My mother collapsed back into her chair. I couldn't breathe. Half of everything my father had built, half of everything I thought was mine, was going to people I'd never even heard of. And more than that, my entire understanding of who my father was had just shattered. Harold continued, his voice measured. "Michael's estate includes his pension, his life insurance policies totaling $1.2 million, a house in Miami that he co-owned with Elena, and investment accounts worth approximately $800,000. There's also this house, which he owned jointly with you, Mrs. Harrison, that remains solely yours under Washington state law. But everything else will be split according to the will." I found my voice. "How is this possible? How did he hide an entire family for years?" Harold explained. "Michael's job gave him the perfect cover. He spent 2 to 3 weeks a month overseas, but he wasn't always flying. He'd arranged his schedule so that his layovers included extended stays in Miami. Elena believed he was an airline pilot who traveled frequently for work. She didn't know about you either. My mother's voice was barely a whisper. She didn't know about us? Harold shook his head. No. According to the documents and a letter Michael left, he kept both families completely separate. Neither of you knew about the other. I felt rage building. So he lied to everyone, for years. And now we're supposed to just accept that half of everything goes to his other family? Harold's tone was sympathetic, but professional. I understand your anger, Jordan, but legally the will is valid. Michael was of sound mind when he drafted it, and the provisions are clear. Unless you can prove fraud or undue influence, there's no basis to contest it. My mother looked broken. I want to see them. I want to meet Elena. Harold hesitated. That might not be wise right now. Emotions are running high, but my mother was insistent. I need to know who she is. I need to understand how this happened. A week later, we flew to Miami. Harold arranged a meeting at his colleague's office. Elena Martinez arrived with her lawyer. She was a striking woman in her late 40s, with dark hair and eyes that looked just as devastated as my mother's. Sofia and Carlos were with her, both looking uncomfortable and confused. We sat across from each other in a sterile conference room. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Finally, Elena broke the silence. Her English was accented but clear. I didn't know about you. Michael told me he was divorced, that he had an ex-wife and a son he rarely saw. He said you didn't want anything to do with him. My mother's voice was icy. That's a lie. We were married. We were happy. Or at least I thought we were. Elena's eyes filled with tears. I thought we were happy too. He was with me and the children constantly when he wasn't flying. He never missed a birthday, a school event, or a holiday. He was a good father. I couldn't stay silent. He was my father too. And you're taking half of everything he left us. Sofia, the older daughter, spoke up. Her voice was shaky. We didn't ask for any of this. We just lost our dad. We're grieving too. I looked at her and saw myself. The same confusion, the same pain, the same sense of betrayal. She was right. This wasn't her fault. It wasn't Carlos's fault either. They were victims of my father's lies just as much as we were. But that didn't change the fact that they were about to take half of the estate I thought was mine. The lawyers took over, discussing the division of assets, the timeline for distribution, and the legal requirements. My mother sat in silence, staring at Elena. Finally, she asked the question I'd been afraid to voice. Did you love him? Elena looked at her, tears streaming down her face. Yes, I loved him very much. And I thought he loved me. My mother's voice cracked. He told me the same thing. The estate was divided exactly as my father's will specified. Elena, Sofia, and Carlos received $600,000 from the life insurance, $400,000 from the investment accounts, and full ownership of the Miami house, which was worth approximately $500,000. My mother and I received the same amounts. The family home in Seattle remained my mother's. On paper, it was equal. But it didn't feel equal. My mother had been married to my father for 32 years. She'd built a life with him, raised me, and believed in their partnership. Elena had been with him for nearly 20 years and had raised 2 children who believed he was fully present in their lives. Both women had been deceived. Both families had been betrayed. Over the next few months, I struggled to process what I'd learned. I went through my father's belongings, looking for clues, trying to understand how he'd managed to maintain 2 separate lives for so long. I found calendars where he'd meticulously tracked his schedule, notebooks with separate contact lists, and even 2 cell phones, one for each family. He'd been methodical, calculating, and incredibly careful. He'd never slipped up, never made a mistake that would have exposed his secret. It was impressive in the worst possible way. My mother fell into a deep depression. The man she'd loved and trusted had lied to her for decades. She questioned every memory, every moment of happiness, wondering what had been real and what had been performance. She eventually started therapy and slowly began to rebuild her sense of self. I reached out to Sofia through social media 6 months after the estate was settled. I didn't know why. Maybe I needed to understand her perspective. Maybe I needed to see if there was a way to make sense of the senseless. We met for coffee in a neutral city, Portland, halfway between Seattle and Miami. It was awkward at first. We were strangers bound by blood and betrayal. But as we talked, I realized we had more in common than I thought. We'd both idealized our father. We'd both believed he was dedicated, honest, and loving. And we'd both been wrong. Sophia told me about her childhood, about how her father had been her hero. Always there for important moments, always supportive. It mirrored my own experience exactly. Carlos, she said, was angry and refused to talk about our father at all. He felt betrayed and didn't want anything to do with the Seattle family. I understood that too. Over time, Sophia and I developed a cautious relationship. We weren't close, but we stayed in touch. We shared stories about our father, trying to piece together who he really was beneath the lies. Elena and my mother never spoke again after that initial meeting. The wound was too deep. But I learned something important through all of this. My father's betrayal didn't define me. His lies didn't erase the good memories I had, even if they were built on a foundation of deception. I had to accept that people are capable of living double lives, of compartmentalizing in ways that seem impossible. And I had to accept that I would never fully understand why he did it. The financial impact was significant. Half of what I'd expected to inherit was gone. It changed my plans, delayed my dreams, and forced me to work harder than I'd anticipated. But it also taught me resilience. It taught me that life doesn't always go according to plan, and that sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who hurt us deepest. I rebuilt my relationship with my mother. We grew closer through shared grief and the process of redefining what family meant. And I learned to let go of the anger. Not because my father deserved forgiveness, but because holding on to that rage was destroying me. Sophia and Carlos lost their father just as I did. They were innocent victims of his choices. Hating them wouldn't bring back the inheritance or undo the lies. My father left behind two families, both built on deception. He left behind children who would never fully trust again, and women who would spend years healing from his betrayal. He left behind an estate divided equally but unfairly because there's no fair way to split the wreckage of a double life. Some secrets destroy more than they protect. Some lies are too big to ever be made right. My father chose to live a lie for decades, and in doing so, he robbed everyone who loved him of the truth. That's his legacy. Not the successful career, not the financial security, but the betrayal that outlasted him. If you've ever discovered that someone you trusted was living a double life, let me know your story in the comments below and subscribe if you believe that truth. No matter how painful, is always better than a comfortable lie.